So this week we're in Parsha Emor, in the book of Leviticus. We're really deep into Leviticus. And at the end of this Parsha is a really brutal story. It describes two men fighting, one a pure Israelite, and another one who has an Egyptian father and an Israelite mother. Now, you might be wondering, how did that happen? And I'll address that a little bit later. In any case, neither of these two men have names, but unusually, the mother of the half-Egyptian man is explicitly named. Her name is Shlomit, the daughter of Divri, of the tribe of Dan. So imagine the scene. Two young men in the middle of the Israelite camp in the wilderness, throwing fists, pummeling each other, their faces contorted with fury and pain, their friends surrounding them, maybe egging them on, one calling the other names, "You half-breed, you Egyptian, you don't belong amongst us, go back to Egypt where you belong." I imagine Shlomit, the mother of the half-Egyptian young man, trying desperately to get them to stop fighting. First, she approaches and gently tries to put her body between them, but the pure Israelite man shoves her out of the way. She begins yelling and crying, but they ignore her. They are consumed by a desire to hurt, to maim, to even kill one another. Seeing that she's helpless to stop the horror before her, Shlomit's knees buckle and she falls, sobbing to the ground. And here's what happens next. The Torah tells us that the son of Shlomit, the Israelite woman, pronounced the name. Vayikov ben ha'isha ha'Yisraelit et ha-shem, meaning the divine name. Now, this word vayikov is very interesting because it means to puncture, to perforate. So what does it mean to put a hole in divinity itself? And then it goes on to say vayikalel, he cursed. So he did two things. First, he punctures, or, in pronouncing explicitly the divine name, which should not be done according to the Torah, except on Yom Kippur by the high priest in the Holy of Holies. So he pronounces this name in the most unholy of contexts, right? In the context of violence. And then vayikalel. So he curses. But if we look closely at the root of that word, it means to make light. And it's the opposite of kavod, which means gravity and respect, honor and glory, like kavod Hashem, the glory of God. What happens in this story is already ugly and horrible, and what happens next is even worse. So no one knows what to do, and he's sort of put in like a temporary prison until God tells them what to do. And what God tells them to do is for all the Israelites who heard the cursing and heard the pronouncing of the name to put their hands on his head, and then all of Israel stones him to death. Now, you can imagine, if we read this literarily, a little measure for measure here, a little midah keneged midah. He makes the holy name, right, the name of glory, light, and he's killed with the heaviness of rocks. The Midrash kind of does us a favor here by giving us a backstory, right? Helps us understand what's happening. And what the Midrash tells us helps us have compassion for the half-Egyptian, half-Israelite man. So according to the Midrash, and this is in the Sifra, which is basically a 3rd century compilation, this half-Israelite, half-Egyptian man goes over to other tribe members in the tribe of Dan, and tries to pitch his tent with them. And they say to him, "What right do you have to pitch your tent in the camp of Dan?" He says, "I'm descended from the daughters of Dan." And they throw Torah at him almost like it's a weapon, quoting the book of Numbers and say, tribal portions follow the house of the father. He appeals the court before the court of Moses, and he lost his case. And so he was so despondent and angry that he arose and cursed God. He was rejected first by his brothers and then again by the courts of Moses. He could not find any justice. And all this poor young man wanted was belonging, right? Something we all want, right? Do we belong? Where do we belong? When do we belong? He wanted to have a home amongst the only people he ever knew, to set up his tent near his brothers. But being of mixed heritage, he was ostracized by his people. And then worse, he was rejected by the courts who could not see beyond the parentage, his parentage, to the human being that wanted so desperately to belong to his people. Everyone agreed this man had no place amongst his people. His poor, poor mother, poor Shlomit bat Divri from the tribe of Dan, what a tragic way to lose a child. Her name, ironically, can be remembered as Peace, the daughter of language, right? Shlomit bat Divri, from the tribe of Dan, from the tribe of judgment, Dan. She stood for peaceful language, and her son came to the most painful, tragic, and violent end because of his words. So I find this story in the Torah a little depressing, but I find the Midrash illuminating and even giving me a little hope, because it gives us a backstory, right? It gives us a wider context with which to understand what is happening for this man, right? For this young man. So the Midrash enlarges the Torah's story and humanizes it. And then I found this amazing contemporary Midrash by Professor Wendy Zierler, who's a professor of modern Jewish literature and feminist studies at HUC, who provides another legend, a contemporary Midrash that helps us understand his mother, Shlomit bat Divri. She asks the crucial and basic question, how did this person of mixed heritage come to be? How and why did Shlomit's son have an Egyptian father? And so she says, given the context of Israelite enslavement in Egypt, is it not possible that Shlomit, like so many African American slaves who were raped and impregnated by their masters, might have been abused and used by a slave master or overseer? And that is how she came to give birth to the son of an Egyptian man. She continues, Shlomit bat Divri was a struggling ex-slave and single mother who labored against all odds to raise her son and shield him from the prejudices of the surrounding community. Alas, the son went out of his mother's tent and discovered that the world around him was not what he expected. He saw that he was a second-class citizen in a society of former second-class citizens, and that he was not wanted among his would-be brethren. His mother may have attempted to counter and diffuse his youthful anger when it flared. Befitting her name, Shlomit, from Shalom, peace, she may have tried on any number of occasions to bring peace and calm to shore up her son's bifurcated identity. So I love this contemporary Midrash. It helps us understand not only the child, but provides a context for his courageous mother, the single mother struggling against all odds to make a home for her son, to create peace for her son in the midst of Israel. Over the past week and a half, we have traveled through Jewish history by commemorating key moments in the Jewish story. First, Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. Then Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day for all the fallen soldiers in Israel, which this year was particularly painful. And finally, Yom HaAtzmaut, the day of Israel's independence, a day that one of my Israeli friends, a rabbi in Tel Aviv, told me was impossible to celebrate this year. There was no joy, and she would not recite the special kiddush, the special sanctification of the day that she wrote a few years ago. Howling through all these commemorative days, all these yoms, I hear the question of Jewish belonging. Where do we belong? History has shown us that we did not belong in Europe, certainly not then. And so the Jewish people formed a state in the Middle East, seeking a home, seeking belonging, seeking safety. But that belonging brought with it pain and displacement for another people, the pain of not belonging. Rabbi Dr. Shai Held, who's the president and dean of the Hadar Institute and author of the new bestseller, Judaism is About Love, if you haven't noticed, Recovering the Heart of Jewish Life, recently quoted Moshe Una, a visionary of religious Zionism who died in 1989. He was a member of Knesset from the National Religious Party and a founder of the Religious Peace Movement. Una was a teacher of Jewish humanism who teaches that there are two elements of love of heritage. One is embracing our own connection to the land, and the other is acknowledging that another people have the same feelings. He calls this chinuch hamoledet, the education of the birthplace. I know I'm dreaming now, but permit me a moment of dreaming. Can you imagine two peoples teaching their children that they both belong to the same land? That there is enough room for two peoples and a recognition that the story of the other is also sacred? Can you imagine two peoples teaching that everyone belongs? I sometimes imagine not a two-state solution, but a two-story solution. That if each people is taught the story of the other, there might be a possibility of peace. For so long, neither people wanted to know the story of the other, each story eclipsing, canceling the narrative of the other. And they certainly don't, for the most part, have the capacity to understand the other at this moment, in the midst of trauma and war. But I still hope and dream. I know you are probably thinking I'm naive, and I might be, but in order to change reality, we need to dream of new possibilities. Theodor Herzl himself, the father of modern political Zionism, said, "If you will it, it is no dream." And Chaim Weizmann, the first president of Israel, used to say, "You don't have to be crazy to be a Zionist, but it helps." So just give me a minute to dream, to be crazy, along with Shlomit, the single mother of the son who was tragically stoned to death because the children of Israel decided he didn't belong. Just imagine with me for a moment that the children of Israel in the wilderness made room for the tent of the child of mixed heritage, for the son of an Egyptian who was also the son of Shlomit bat Divri in the tribe of Dan. One could say she speaks the language of peace, but no one listened to her. Imagine the Israelites listening to her words and saving her child's life by making space for him, by making space for all the children. Imagine two peoples listening to her message that each human being, each child in this world should have a place of safety on this earth, should belong, that each deserves a place of dignity, of hope, that despair, that exclusion, that violence is not a home, will not provide the most basic human need of belonging. Can you imagine? Can we imagine?